Subhrakant, I want to address the issue of providing a thrust to exports, because that's also part of the recommendations that FICCI has put forward to the government. Now, in the conversations that have happened with the officials at the Finance Ministry as well as with the Finance Minister, what is the indication that you have been given in terms of what the priorities can be? Of course, nobody can talk specifics, but, where the government believes that they need to put their might behind certain sectors and champion certain causes. What's the indication given at this point in time? Exports, I would imagine, will be part of that bucket list.
So, Shereen, undoubtedly exports are a very, very important part of the agenda, because even as we look to make India a global manufacturing hub, it is obviously important that the local, the domestic market, which is very large, which is integrated due to GST reforms, that will play an important role. But there is no doubting the importance of exports in that equation as well. So from that point of view, I think, from a FICCI perspective, what we have also talked about is there are certain, the whole idea of RODTEP, which is meant to do away with the effect of local taxes and duties as far as exports are concerned. Certain sectors have been left out, and there is a case for that to be considered, of course, within the overall budget allocations which are available. That apart, I think there is also more than just incentives for exports. I think it is also important, and I'm going a little bit beyond the budget at this point in time, but looking at FTAs and things like that, operationalizing that, because today FTAs are not just about about access to each other's markets, but it also involves investments, it involves technology transfer. And all of this ultimately have an important role to play in India climbing up the value chain and becoming the global manufacturing hub. So we do expect a continued focus on all of these things. But I would, sector specific, I think is hard to guess. But I would put my money on on the high potential sectors which can really add to India's export numbers and help bring down whatever deficit there is in that regard.
Well, that is right. And across different sectors, we have seen the government, whether it is move on bringing in more domestic manufacturing, whether it has to do with the electronics sector or even defense, where we've just seen the government release the 5th list for indigenization. But Harsha, let me come now to consumption, because we've been talking a lot about what the government could or may do as far as boosting investment is concerned. But what about consumption? And what we are seeing today play out across FMCG sales, for instance, is that volume growth continues to be tepid, especially as far as the rural pockets are concerned. What's the expectation now in terms of consumption? Do you actually see the government moving on providing more, to specific targeted groups? For instance, PM Kisan, do you expect the allocation there to be enhanced, indexed for inflation? What's the expectation to boost consumption?
I think one of the challenge for the consumption has been the inflation, which has been high due to the geopolitical conditions, etc. So I think, yes, controlling the inflation will certainly help the growth in consumption. Apart from that, the growth in employment or the focus in employment should also help in increase in consumption. This year in rural, the monsoon seems to be good. The predictions are good from the IMD, and hence, that should also help the consumption. Apart from that, whether the government is going to introduce all the initiatives, from the perspective of increasing the consumption, they have taken a lot of initiatives, and I believe, they will continue.
Yes, that is certainly the expectation. Anish, coming back to you now, what's the indication, especially as far as rural demand is concerned? There are concerns that we are seeing car makers like even Mahindra resort to price cuts, etc. What's the expectation on demand, and what's the expectation on measures to boost consumption, especially to deal with the rural economy?
So, Shereen, we are not very concerned about it right now. We've seen some green shoots on the farm side with tractors. And while there has been a lot of focus on the price cut, this is something that we had, in fact, talked about 6 months ago. And in the cycle of the vehicle, we had taken up prices and then we brought them down slightly beyond that. And that's just for one model based on its current life cycle. So therefore, it's not something that really worries us in terms of consumption. We are seeing a fairly robust economy. We've seen some softness in pockets last year, specifically in rural. We are seeing some signs of that picking up right now. And on balance, I think things are fairly good.
Things are fairly good at this point in time, but and I want to, address the issue of jobs, and I want to go back to that with a concern that industry is grappling with today. And Anish, I'll start by asking you, we've seen a spate of states. It started with states like Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and now you've got Karnataka moving a bill to ensure that there is reservation in the private sector and, for local domiciled individuals. Now, industry has, of course, reacted, asking for a review and a rethink. But do you believe that this is likely to be, if more and more states were to pursue this policy and ensure that there is local reservation, etc., do you believe that this is going to be a dampener, not just for domestic investment, but also for foreign investment? But it goes against the grain of the ease of doing business and freedom of markets.
Shereen, absolutely right. You summarized it very well. That will be a dampener because anything that's a constraint makes it tougher to do business. And we should actually have more free market. That's what we are in a democracy. That's been the strength of India. And the more regulation we have, the tighter norms we have, the barriers we put in terms of labor force, etc., will only hurt us. So therefore, we would advocate more of an open, free market and practices that make it much easier to do business.
Subhrakant, weigh in on that. We, of course, have seen labor reforms are pending. The 4 labor codes were cleared, but they're pending in various states across different, areas of execution. And now you've got this business of reservation even in the private sector. Of course, in the case of Haryana, the High Court had struck it down, calling it unconstitutional. And that perhaps will be the hope that industry has, that, that these provisions will be struck down. But how concerned is industry today, Subhrakant?
So, Shereen, I fully endorse what Anish said, which is that anything which goes against the grain of ease of doing business is something that ought to worry industry. And when we talk about the huge success of GST in breaking down internal barriers to trade, we don't want to put up other barriers which come in the way of efficient functioning. And the concern, of course, with such an approach is that if all the other states were to start emulating it, then where do we go from there? So having said that, it's something that obviously I think one needs to look into deeper. But I also wanted to weigh in a little bit on what you mentioned about the labor codes, because that is also something which is very important, and I think one needs to go ahead. Because when we talk about focusing on ease of doing business and reducing the cost of doing business, the obvious intent is to first start out with the low-hanging fruit and then go on to more complex reforms. And, in this country, what we need to do when it comes to labor reforms is to look beyond distilling it down to a simple hire and fire, because there is much more that these 4 labor codes achieve, provide protection to workers. They, make things a lot simpler. Compliance becomes a lot simpler. I mean, multiple rules and regulations and laws have been condensed down to 4 labor codes. And therefore, one hopes that there can be a consensus across the political spectrum to say that this is in the best interests of all concerned. And like I said, it's not to oversimplify it and sort of link it to the introduction of hire and fire in India. I don't think that's the intention at all. It does protect both employers and, more importantly, employees in terms of the from various aspects.
Right. Anish, I'm going to give you the final say. You did say that at this point in time, business confidence is strong and all of you are optimistic about the road ahead in terms of demand visibility. But if there were any specific pain points, and I've heard many talk about the lack of skilled manpower, for instance. On one hand, you're talking about the lack of jobs. On the other hand, industry is complaining about the lack of skilled manpower. If there are any specific concerns that you believe will move the needle to ensure that we continue to deliver on this 8% kind of growth rate, what would the priority list be for you from Budget 2024?
Shereen, I'm going to start with saying that 8% is not enough for India. We need to get into a much higher growth rate, ideally 10% plus, maybe 10 to 12 if we can get there. And we have the ability to do that. A lot of actions have been taken that I would look at as building blocks to enable this to happen. And we need to move faster on skills development. That's going to be critical for this to happen. We need to move faster on making manufacturing the lowest cost in the world, because India can be the manufacturing hub of the world. We have the ability to do that. And India today has a 3% share of global manufacturing. If we are to meet our Viksit Bharat goals, that has to go to 12%. And that really will be the boost for India in terms of its growth. And therefore, the key focus areas I'd look at are how do we get that to happen with lower cost manufacturing, higher quality, and more skills.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we will wait to see what the budget delivers when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman rises to speak on the 23rd of July. And we'll have all of you gentlemen back with us to decode the budget in real time and the fine print in real time right here on CNBC TV18. The expectations are that there be continuity, even though industry is not expecting radical reforms. The ask is for continuity and the ask is for stability in policy and ease of doing business. Anish Shah, Anant Goenka, Harsha, Subhrakant Panda, many thanks for joining us here on the CNBC TV18 Budget Countdown. We will see you on the 23rd when the budget is delivered. We'll take a break here on CNBC TV18. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.